day after he offered sharp criticisms of the MAGA movement inside the Republican Party during a primetime address in Philadelphia. President Biden offered this further explanation.
I don't consider any Trump supporter to be a threat to the country. I do think anyone who calls for the use of violence, fails to condemn violence when it's used, refuses to acknowledge when an election has been won, insists upon changing the way in which the rules you count votes. That is a threat to democracy.
And joining me now to talk about this is former Republican congressman and host of the White Flag podcast, Joe Walsh, and CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist Maria Cardona. Joe, let me start with you first. We heard Republicans like the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy demand that President Biden apologize for invoking fascism to describe the ideology of former President Trump and his supporters. How do you see this?
Joe Biden doesn't owe, Jim, an apology to anybody. I think the context here is so important. 19 to 20 months ago, Donald Trump led an effort to violently overthrow an American election. Here we are in September of 2022. 80% of the Republican Party does not accept Joe Biden as their legitimate president. Our democracy is in a lot of trouble. And I'm glad, Jim, that President Biden addressed that and called out violence and called out a philosophy. Look, I come from MAGA world. He didn't call out Trump voters. He called out the MAGA philosophy, which is anti-democracy.
And Maria, what do you think about this? What can the president do to bring in more Republicans from the moderate wing of the party into the fold? Do you think he accomplished that the other night, and could he do more to accomplish that in the future?
I think he started to, Jim, and I think what he should continue to do, and I think he will, is not only calling out this huge threat that is the MAGA extremist agenda and those who follow it, including more than 80 Republican primary winners who could be in a position to have control over elections if they win in November. So it's important to call that out and to tell Americans that it is in our hands to protect our democracy. But what I hope that President Biden continues to also do is to underscore how important a traditional, common sense, smart, democracy-respecting Republican Party we need in order to have a viable two-party, healthy American democracy. So I think if he continues to do that, to underscore that he is calling on common sense, traditional Republicans who are the ones who understand what a threat to democracy Donald Trump and the MAGA agenda is, and all of the so-called leaders that are following him and genuflecting at his altar, continue to call them out and then continue to say, look, we need a healthy Republican Party so that we can continue to fight on the battlefield of ideas for what is best for this country. But until that happens, we are in a position where we have to continue to call out these devastating and dangerous lies that are part and parcel of the MAGA ultra extremist agenda.
And Joe, let's remind our viewers of this moment that Donald Trump had as president in 2020 when he referred to people on the other side of the aisle as fascists. Let's watch.
We're going left wing all the way. Fascists, they are fascists. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them, but they're getting closer and closer. We have to win this election.
Joe, do you think there's some pearl clutching going on over what President Biden said, given where we've been lately, given some of the rhetoric that Donald Trump has used?
Yeah, Jim, I have zero patience for any Trump supporter who calls Joe Biden divisive after the Donald Trump presidency. Here's Joe Biden's problem, and here's America's problem, though, Jim. The MAGA philosophy, the MAGA movement, it's no longer some fringe movement within the Republican Party. It is the Republican Party. And America really needs to wrap its arms around that. And I think President Biden began to play a real leadership role the other night in getting Americans to understand this. We're not talking about a fringe movement. Again, 80% of Republicans do not accept basic election results. Hello, that's a huge problem.
And Maria, Trump will be in Pennsylvania tonight, stumping for Republican candidates. Doug Mastriano, who is running for governor, he's been an election denier. He's also out there trying to support Mehmet Oz for the Senate, who has been struggling with his campaign, if you believe the latest polls and all of this. What do you think about all of that? And do Democrats need to worry about that they don't get too complacent when it comes to this very critical battleground state?
Oh, 150,000%, Jim, on that last point. The last thing Democrats have to do is to be complacent. That is dangerous. We have to still be very concerned. Look, the momentum is certainly in our corner right now, but we have to play like we are absolutely behind in both the House and the Senate. We have to play like our democracy is on the line, because it is. I assure you that tonight we're going to continue to hear massively destructive, dangerous lies from Donald Trump. And here's what I believe people need to continue to think about and realize. The American people rejected the MAGA agenda in 2018, Jim. Let's not forget that. The American people continue to reject the MAGA agenda in 2020. That is why Joe Biden won legitimately by a long shot. It was a huge win by Joe Biden. The American people, I believe, will continue to reject the MAGA extremist agenda, but we have to continue to call it out. We cannot be complacent. That is the last thing we have to do, which is why I'm so glad that Joe Biden made this speech a couple of nights ago to put everyone on notice, because it is our responsibility to make sure that this American idea, this American democracy, which is still very fragile, it's not something that's guaranteed. It is upon all of us to make sure that we protect it. We have to go out and, like President Biden said, vote, vote, vote.
Yeah. This democracy belongs to all of us. It should be precious to all of us. Joe Walsh, Maria Cardona, great conversation. Great to see both of you. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jim.